Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining, and welcome to another session of our Day One and Beyond series, where we take you through a variety of topics. Our today's session is understanding multi-cloud and hybrid cloud deployments. So, in this session, learn about how you can leverage Oracle Cloud Solutions for both hybrid and multi-cloud environments. So, we will cover major considerations, use cases, benefits, and available Oracle Cloud Solutions for each type of cloud deployment. I'd like to introduce Jason and Joey as the main presenters. I will hand it over to Jason.
Thanks, Olivier. So if you like today's session, we get to the end. We have an ongoing series around Customer Connect and Day One and Beyond type of webinars like we've got today. There's a few more coming up. Normally get a couple months out there. So if you like what you see, go back out there. There's always a set of new topics that we're getting ready to set up and present out. Okay, so agenda for today. Primary goals is to talk about what are some of the drivers around multi-cloud, some common use cases, what are some of the services that you can use with a multi-cloud to drive out new experiences. We'll switch gears a little bit. We'll talk about hybrid cloud, those kind of edge type use cases, and then talk about some of the Oracle services that enable hybrid cloud experiences. So we're going to start off with multi-cloud. So if we roll the clock back, a couple of years, say even 4 years back, most customers were using at least 2 or 3 clouds. But the strategy went something like this. You normally put all of your stuff, your IaaS, your PaaS, your servers, generally in one cloud is what most customers are doing. And they had 1 or 2 other clouds that might be taking care of specific services. Maybe you had something for your databases, maybe using a SaaS service for your HR or your data warehouse. But, 4 or 6 years back, it was primarily one cloud plus a few other small ones. Rolling forward now, what we see is everybody's got multiple clouds. You've got multiple clouds for your servers, for the workloads you're building on cloud native PaaS experiences. You've probably got multiple SaaSes that you're using as well. We'll talk a little bit about some of those business drivers. But in the field, some of the common challenges that I hear from customers quite often is, how do I set up interoperability between my workloads, right? How do I build out the APIs to connect? How do I move data back and forth in those data pipelines? How do I build good network connectivity with high bandwidth, low latency, and make sure that it's highly available for any kind of component failures? And the other problem I see is I've got multiple clouds now, and I need to operate across all of them, but I don't have enough staff to be really good at Azure and AWS and OCI and Workday and Snowflake. So how do I minimize the burden that I'm putting on my staff that's got to operate and deploy? And these would be some of the things we talk about today and what we see, where we're going, and services that help ease some of that burden on you as a customer. So we talked about drivers for multi-cloud, and I tend to kind of put these in 2 buckets. Defensive things like you're guarding against price shifts or vendor lock-in. And as we talk about especially the compute platforms and modern services and app modernization, there's a lot of talk around Kubernetes, which is a good way of taking small applications and containerizing them. And the nice thing about Kubernetes is you really can take your containerized workloads and float them to any of the major cloud providers, whether that's EKS, as a service on AWS, AKS on Azure, on OCI, we have the Oracle Kubernetes Engine, OKE, but it allows you to float your containerized workloads, your microservices, to really any cloud platform provider, allowing you to get the best price, the best performance, put them near other workloads for latency or functionality. And then there's offensive plays. You're going after the best of the breed. No one would argue that if you look at office productivity tools, Microsoft pretty much won the battle in O365, right? As you hear about Oracle, we're a database company, and we've got the best database on the planet. And each vendor has where they're really strong, and oftentimes you want to be able to pull together the best of breed in all those services across multiple platforms, right? And there's other things beyond that. There's definitely things around data sovereignty, right? You may need to keep your data in a certain locale due to any kind of government or regional requirements. You may be trying to make sure that you have certain preferences you're meeting from the business and what they're used to using or where they've got bench strength. But there's multiple drivers that we see that have pretty much required everybody to have multiple clouds for your IaaS, PaaS, and SaaS workloads today. And this was a journey, right? Again, we wind the clock back a little bit, 8 years, 10 years, right? There was public and private. You hosted on premise, and you might have a cloud, maybe 2 clouds, and it was an either or. You had to put it on premise or you put it in the cloud, and they're normally separate. We got a little bit of connectivity that allowed us to have public and private, where you're probably connecting some workloads back on premise. Connectivity got really good, and where you as a customer didn't have to be the infrastructure provider, figure out the architecture, the high availability, and operate and monitor it. Where you had partners like Equinix, Digital Realty, AT&T come in and help take care of some of that network infrastructure burden. In some cases, you had workloads that were latency sensitive. Think manufacturing or a logistics and warehouse where you've got equipment on the floor that needs to have workloads close to you. All the cloud providers started coming up with dedicated cloud, where we could take portions of our infrastructure and host them on premise near your workloads that had those latency sensitive requirements. And then multi-cloud. Multi-cloud was a combination of all these things coming together, right? Good network connectivity, multiple clouds that you're using because of best of breed or prices, right? The ability to have, hybrid options where you might have a dedicated cloud on premise and to weave this all together into a multi-cloud experience. The most common use cases I still see out in the field is where customers want to leverage best of the best, right? Take for the example, maybe you've got a workload that's using a .NET web front end or some application that's specific to a specific vendor, and you're using something like the Oracle database, right? In that scenario, oftentimes for pricing, support, and functionality, it makes sense to take the service and host it on that vendor's platform. So Microsoft Power BI, a .NET, of course, is going to run very well on Microsoft Azure. You'll probably get the best price to performance on that. You take something like the Oracle database, right? We're going to give the best price performance and licensing. There's certain features like RAC that only work on our platforms. You're going to host that on Oracle Cloud Infrastructure, right? OCI. And it's how do you wire that together so that your customers, your internal customers, your external customers have a seamless experience that they don't know that it's spread across two cloud platforms. Cost optimization has been just the way we do business now. A couple of years back, there were a lot of lift and shift projects, and everybody ran to the cloud to migrate their workloads. And along the way, they brought their old inefficiencies and oftentimes maybe didn't take advantage of scaling workloads down. We definitely scaled up, and that was great. But along the way, we had a lot of cost inefficiencies. And most of my customers, not all of them, cost optimization is just built into everything. It's built in from new workloads. It's built into things we're modernizing. It's even built into workloads that we know we want to retire, but we want to cost optimize whatever life it has left. We talk about workload mobility, and this kind of goes back to the story of how do I take workloads and have the freedom to move them around for cost optimization, or because of services that I want to use, or because of a platform that I might be getting off of, and I want to be able to move the workloads around as I see fit. And then workload resiliency. A good example of this is I had a customer a few months back that had a data warehouse on a competitor's platform and ours. And because of component failures, cloud component failures, they needed to fail over. And they failed over successfully on our platform, ran for a period of time until our competitors' technical issues were resolved, and then were able to fail back over again. And that allowed them to have a much quicker recovery time and not have as great an impact because they could still run in the same region with that critical data warehouse workload. So failover DR is a conversation we're having a lot more about a multi-cloud strategy. One of the common customer challenges, again, is how do I reduce the operational overhead? And I think the most common one I get is how do I connect different components spread across the cloud? It's oftentimes a networking discussion early on, and we're trying to figure out how to split a workload. One of the first things we introduced several years ago was the Oracle Azure Interconnect. And it was this idea that previous to this, as a customer, if you wanted to connect, say, OCI to Azure, you had to be responsible for building out the network infrastructure. You had to build connectivity from on-premise to OCI, and then you build out connectivity from on-premise to Azure, and then you had to connect the two together in what we often called a hairpin, right? The idea that I go from OCI down to a colo provider, your on-premise environment, and then back up again to Azure. And networking, hairpins are usually bad, right? It means there's a lot of inefficiencies. You're making some unnecessary hops. You're adding on some additional latency. With Interconnect, this was the first time that we really kind of break down those walls where essentially we just ran fiber cable straight over to an Azure rack. It's from our rack to their rack. Now there's other equipment along the way, but it's this idea that as a customer, you are no longer responsible for that infrastructure to build it, to configure it, to make sure it was healthy and monitor it, make sure it's highly available. You push that burden to, in this case, Microsoft and Oracle to take care of that for you. And in the process, give you very high bandwidth, 1, 10 or gig or higher, multiple links, a low latency, right, between us and them because we're basically running fiber from one rack to another, 1.5 milliseconds of latency. So an experience like they're sitting on the same network together. And all of the ongoing lifecycle maintenance of that hardware is our problem to deal with. You as a customer can now split a workload like a .NET server on Azure, an Oracle database on OCI, and your customers wouldn't know that they were split. We recently announced the same type of connectivity for Google Cloud. I don't have the slides here, apologies today, but the same idea is where Oracle is going to continue to go as we build out these kind of foundational connections to other cloud platforms. Now, we've got regions all over the world, right? But you're going to find us in a lot of the exact same reasons that you're going to find Azure, like in the East. Azure's got presence, we've got presence, AWS, GCP, all the SaaS providers, we're all kind of in the same location. Oftentimes, we're in the same buildings because we use the same providers like Equinix or Digital Realty. Again, this is places where we're going to rapidly build out these interconnects to other providers. You talk about the West Coast, we're in Phoenix, we're in San Jose. In Central, we recently had a region pop up in Chicago. And so all across the world, you're going to see where all the cloud providers, whether you're a big hyperscaler like AWS, GCP, OCI, or a SaaS provider like a Workday or a Snowflake, we're all going to be in the same regions, giving us the ability to start building out some of these network connectivity models that we're talking about. What this unlocks for you as a customer is choice. It's choice to pick the right service for your workloads, even if it's on 2 different clouds or 3 different clouds. It's cost optimization, right? Being able to look across all the cloud providers and figure out what's the cheapest model for, say, running a fleet of 10,000 Linux servers, or what's the cheapest model for me to get the licenses I need for my database, or my Java, or my .NET, or my WebSphere, whatever that application license is. And it's reduced operational overhead. It's the cloud providers taking on that infrastructure that largely was a lot of networking burden on you and shifting it to us, where you consume the service in a way you're not worried about whether the network is up and running, whether it was built to be highly available or not. One of the first services we released after the Interconnect that also kind of proves where we're going with multi-cloud is a service called ODSA, Oracle Database Service for Azure. It is the idea that a lot of customers have presences on multiple clouds, but they don't have enough staff to have deep expertise in every single one. You might be really good at Azure, but only have a handful of people that have gotten much depth in OCI. And you really don't have unlimited staff to continue building out and getting people certified, going to training. And so one of the ideas we've had with several services, and this was the first one, was how do we make it so you can consume what is arguably our best service? The one thing everybody knows us for is the Oracle database. How do we expose that to Azure? If you've got Azure admins that are very skilled, they can work in the Azure environment and just see this, basically an Exadata or an autonomous database like a service like it's sitting there in Azure. And then we took care of all the back-end networking, again, with the Interconnect, so that the service is running in OCI. But from the standpoint, me as a developer or a DevOps person or a server and database admin, it looks like it's all coming from the Azure data plane, the Azure console when you log on. It's right there where you can deploy it. I don't think we have the slide here, but the next thing we came out with was database for Azure. And that was a slight modification to that on the screen here, we've got the autonomous database Exadata running in OCI. Last year, when we announced Database Azure, we took our physical infrastructure stack, our compute, our network, our storage, everything that optimizes this to run really fast, and we're physically hosting that stack now in Azure data centers. So we're taking some of the best of breed that we have and not only giving you a way to get it in OCI, but you can also choose to consume that physical stack running in Azure data center as a service there too. Whereas the interesting use case in the field on this one is, oftentimes when you go to predict how much you're going to consume with any of the cloud providers, Azure, for example, maybe you overpredict what you need for the year, or you don't quite consume as much as you have, and you've got a little bit left on your Mac, or basically the Azure way of consuming credits. And we oftentimes see customers saying, I'm using Exadata, I've got additional Mac left over in Azure, but I don't know how a good way to consume it. Can I spend some of that in the Oracle database? And with ODSA, and especially Database Azure, it allows you as a customer to consume one of our best services, whether it's hosted in OCI, the physical stack's hosted in Azure, in a way where you can burn up your Mac credits in Azure and get that same great service. Again, seamless access. You don't have to worry about the infrastructure, the connectivity. You can just consume it as though that service is part of Azure. And you're going to see this more and more with the other cloud providers as we figure out how do we lower the burden on you as a customer to enable our best of breed to consume from our platform or within our competitor's platform. So again, that lack of expertise, very common problem. Like I can't learn all these different tools. I don't have time to learn all the different consoles. Another good example where we did this in the past was Oracle MySQL Heatwave, another one of our databases that is just blazing fast for certain workloads. We released that to AWS with that same idea. I know AWS maybe very well. I'm used to deploying things there, but I want to explore using SQL Heatwave to speed up some of my database queries. This is an example where, again, we took one of our best services, and as an AWS admin, a DevOps person, a database guy, I could consume that from AWS as though the whole thing is sitting over there. Yeah, you'll see this with a lot of our strategy going forward in OCI is just, again, how do we enable you as a customer to build stuff on multiple clouds? How do we take the best services that we provide at Oracle and give you a way to consume them from other clouds? What I see going forward, again, with the time I get to spend with customers out in the field, you're looking for more choices, right? You have multiple clouds, you have multiple options. You're going to choose them by best in breed, cost optimization, your bench strength and where you can deploy, where you got guys that really are good at that whole DevOps lifecycle, configuration management, your automation to deploy. It's going to drive new innovation, right? The ability to use best in breed, the ability to be able to take multiple clouds and use what's best for use case is going to enable you guys to run faster, to be more innovative with your ideas, and use what we do the best at on every cloud platform. And overall, less overhead. You're going to continue to see all the platforms taking that infrastructure burden, whether we're talking about network or the way you provision services, and shifting more of that to us, being our problems. So you don't have to worry about that undifferentiated heavy lifting in infrastructure or DevOps. You can get to the point of building out what you want and seeing us as providers take more of the responsibility for you. And every year, going forward, I expect to see more and more announcements driving to these three things. Okay. With that, Joey, I'm going to hand it over to you. So if you're okay, we do a quick switcheroo here. I think you're going to drive from your side. Is that correct?
That is correct. Thank you, Jason. So switching gears a little bit, we're going to talk about hybrid cloud. And we spent some time on multi-cloud. Jason did a great job covering all of the potential use cases and challenges and services that we can use to help resolve those challenges. And one of the main points Jason brought up was we're going to be using different clouds to get kind of the best of breed for each type of service or each area of your environment, right? And that's also true when you're utilizing hybrid environments as well. There are going to be some advantages to having your resources on premise. So there's going to be certain compliance requirements, certain security requirements, certain latency requirements, things that you're going to have to keep some of your workload on premises, but you still want to be able to leverage the benefits of cloud as well. And that's where the hybrid piece comes into play. So how do I continue to take advantage of what I have on premises and comply with all of those different requirements, but still be able to use kind of the modernization of the cloud, being able to standardize environments across both on-premise and my different cloud environments, being able to utilize the latency and performance advantages of being on your physical location, but then also being able to extend your environment for different things like expanding capacity within the cloud or setting up a disaster recovery environment within the cloud as well. So again, as we move towards a more distributed cloud model, right, you're going to have some stuff that's on-prem for its own certain regions. You'll have stuff within AWS or Azure, GCP, and you'll have some stuff within Oracle. And our goal is really to help introduce services that can help you, A, leverage the benefits of each, and B, kind of be able to integrate and manage everything a little more effectively here. So if we kind of look at the range of solutions that we're going to kind of cover today, and again, high level, just letting you know what's available based off of what kind of use case you have. We have a lot of solutions for a lot of different use cases, and not every hybrid cloud deployment, not every cloud deployment as a whole is going to look the same. So depending on some of those requirements that we talked about, like security, performance, compliance, some of these services or combination of are going to be a better fit for others. So you can see from the table on the screen here, as you move from the left to the right, as you go to the right, you're going to be utilizing more isolated services, meaning more locked down to your environment and adhering to more specific requirements. Versus way over here on the left, you have public cloud, which is going to be almost entirely Oracle managed, commercial, multi-tenant, globally accessible, talking about all those regions that Jason went over earlier on in the slide. Whereas if you go all the way to the other end of the spectrum, right, something like roving edge within your own customer network meets very specific government requirements. Then you have things like Exadata and private cloud appliances, more single tenant, customer controlled, and isolated. So wherever you fit on this spectrum, right, it's going to vary depending on what those requirements are, but we do want to make you aware of which services you can leverage to make sure that you're getting kind of the best of what you can for your type of environment. And this is a slightly better view of our distributed cloud portfolio. So, right, we talked about multi-cloud on the right. You can see the rows and columns here. We'll have the deployment type as a column, and then you'll have services available as your rows here. So top row, all services available. Bottom row, select services available. So these are going to be more specific to different deployment types, right? So if we stay on multi-cloud here, Oracle database at Azure, specific to database workloads. Oracle database service for Azure, same thing. MySQL, Heatwave for Azure / on AWS, right? They're specific to that type of workload versus something at the top like Azure Interconnect. You have that dedicated connection, but for all different kinds of services that you could be utilizing across each of your cloud providers. Public cloud, right? You have different public cloud deployments, sovereign regions. So that'll be localized to a specific region to help you, or specific geographic area to help you meet some different data residency requirements. General public cloud regions. We have our government regions as well to meet your government requirements, and then isolated regions, which we'll cover a little bit more later on in the presentation as well. We move further left, right? Higher customer control, Oracle Alloy, and dedicated region. Each of these is basically running Oracle Cloud hardware, but either specifically in your region where you are utilizing those services, or Oracle Ally, where you are basically serving as the cloud provider, utilizing Oracle hardware for those services and distributing those to your customers. And then hybrid cloud, right? VMware Solution, we'll talk about that. And then the specific like appliances that are going to be at your premises that you'll be using either for your Exadata workloads, different database workloads, compute workloads, and roving edge devices as well. So a couple dimensions to this diagram, but it helps you kind of see where each of these fit based off of the level of control that you want versus the level of control that Oracle will have for you. So diving into each of these, we're going to kind of now move left to right from here. So we're going to start from the top left of that diagram. We have the VMware solution. So that kind of fit in the hybrid cloud column and the all services offered row. And this solution is a great option for many different use cases. So it could use it for things like data center migrations, disaster recovery, data center expansion. But the most common use case that we see and that we're going to highlight a little bit more today is the data center migration piece, because you can move your entire VMware estates to the cloud without changing a lot of your different operations and processes. So let's say you wanted to do exit your data center, do a lift and shift of your applications, but you still really want to extend the value of your VMware solution stack. You can move it and use it on our platform with very minimal change. So if you have that significant investment in VMware infrastructure, you can still take advantage of the benefits of public cloud using this service and retain full administrative access. So it gives you fully automated implementation of your VMware software-defined data centers just within your own OCI tenancy. It's going to run on OCI bare metal instances and contain all of those different components like vSphere, vSAN, vCenter, HCX, NSXT. So all of that's still going to be available for you to use and keep your operations fairly similar to what you're using on-premise. So pretty easy comparison to on-premise deployment, just running within our cloud and taking advantage of some of those public cloud benefits like you can see on the screen. So elastic capacity, accelerated operations, accelerated business velocity, more clear costs, different cost structure that you can work with there as well. And I know Jason has a lot of experience with this, so I just want to make sure he can add anything that I missed there. If you want to add a little more color, just maybe some customer use case.
Yeah. So this topic about what do I do with my VMware state is probably in the top 2 or 3 topics that I'm talking with all my customers about. And it really comes down to, as most of you are aware, VMware was bought up by Broadcom a while back, and then recently this year they announced some pricing changes that, for most customers, there was a bit of a negative impact. Your bill went up, and customers are looking for, what are my options for how I move forward. Sometimes that bill went up, small amounts, 2-3 times, and sometimes it's 10 to 20 times the bill. And so there's a little bit of sticker shock going on across all of IT when it comes to what do I do with my VMware workloads. One of the recent customers I had just in the last month or two came to us and said, look, I've got 3 goals. I've got a goal that I need to maintain a certain population of my workloads running on VMware. They're going to be here a couple years. There's no need to modernize or retire. I just need somewhere to put them, and I'm looking for some price stabilization. We've got some of that with our OCVS service, where we've got locked in rates from last year. Customer said, I've also got to modernize some things, right? I'm not going to be keeping everything in the VMware workloads. I may be taking parts of this and moving them to more PaaS and SaaS models. And if I've got a population here that's legacy and it's old, all right, it's not going to be around very long. As much as possible, I'm going to try to retire some tech debt, and it's going to get retired out. Basically, the approach we had on this one is, yes, you can go to OCVS, right? And there are interesting ways of doing a lift and shift and minimizing the impact to your customers that Joey said, like doing things like, I want to extend at a layer 2 my network. And why that's important is I can keep the IP address, especially these older workloads where sometimes you've got IP dependencies that you don't know whether you have them or not, right? Until you actually change the IP and something blows up. Being able to keep your IP by extending your network into OCI on the OCVS service oftentimes minimizes the impact to your customers, to your app teams, to your database teams, to legacy apps that were built, probably abandoned at some point after 10 years, and it's not well documented. Second thing is the customer want to retire, right? With it being a cloud platform, we have the flexibility that you can ramp down your resources and stop paying for them, right? That's native across all clouds. So as you retire and shrink your platform, your bill can shrink with you, right? We can shrink down your clusters. We can retire things. You're not stuck with a 3-year lease cycle for hardware, right? We also talked about modernization, right? After this customer got the workload to OCI, we've talked about how do we move you more into PaaS and SaaS services? How do we use things like if you have integration needs, and we've got one of the best integration platforms and across the industry, how do we use like Oracle Integration Cloud to simplify my work there? How do I use the Analytics Cloud to simplify my dashboards? And so we came up with the multi-pronged strategy of, I need to ease your burden, reduce your cost. We're going to do a quick shift into OCVS, but that's not the end of the game, right? We want to also modernize and help you where you need to retire old tech debt. Right? This is one of the most popular topics, one of the most popular services that I'm talking with all my customers about right now.
Perfect. Thank you, Jason. If you have that existing VMware footprint, right, this is going to be one of the main services that you'll look at as we start to move more into that hybrid cloud model, like you mentioned. Now, if we look at some of the services within the distributed cloud portfolio that we kind of touched upon in that diagram at the beginning, the services that are going to reside at your customer data center, you can see that in this box here, right? So we'll go through dedicated region, we'll go through Exadata Cloud at Customer, Compute Cloud at Customer, which is pretty new, and then Oracle Private Cloud Appliance as well. So all of these kind of fit under that overall hybrid cloud umbrella, but all specifically residing in your data center. So, right, it all kind of starts with the public cloud here on the left, but your public cloud, right, it's not residing in your data center. But all of that functionality, for the most part, is available with something like dedicated region. It's just sitting on your premises. Then you have something like Exadata Cloud at Customer for your database platform services, using that on-prem. Now there's the Compute Cloud at Customer, so for your infrastructure services in your data center. And then Private Cloud Appliance is where you have the engineered system with OCI compatible compute, storage, networking, all on premise and designed for really people who want a cloud-like development and deployment experience, but still able to adhere to some of those data residency requirements that many customers have to go through. So if we double click into these a little bit, we'll start with OCI dedicated region. So we're going to start with the more broad option here, where you have the widest range of services available to you, and then we'll go more specific into those database and compute workloads. So OCI dedicated region, complete OCI cloud region within your data center. You have the same level of agility, you still have some scalability and comparable economics to public cloud, but you retain full control of your data and applications to help you meet the highest levels of security and your data residency requirements that we mentioned earlier, but can still modernize your infrastructure with all of the cloud services that you would be typically leveraging within the public cloud. It's still also going to be managed by Oracle on your premises. So you can see on the diagram here, you have a separate section of your data center for Oracle hardware behind an Oracle physical access cage. So Oracle will come in, they'll install it, they'll operate it, they'll support it, and they'll upgrade everything within that dedicated region the same way that we maintain all of these hardware appliances within our public cloud regions worldwide. So we're really just placing this within your data center to help you get some of those advantages of that localized aspect of your hardware. So again, for things like data residency, low latency applications, modernization, and such. Now, again, this is going to require some level of significant investment to get started with, right? If you want to start with just your database workloads, right? Many customers leverage Exadata, right? One of the top database offerings within the industry today. And let's say you can't necessarily use Exadata's cloud service option, but you want to still utilize the power of Exadata and all of the different functionalities that go along with it, but have it reside within your data center behind your firewall. You have Oracle Exadata Cloud at Customer there for that. So you have the secure tunnel to the Oracle public cloud. You get lots of the cloud security and operations features that go along with it. You access it via the OCI control plane like you would with a public cloud service, and then you utilize the Oracle Cloud UI or REST APIs to access lots of the features within here as well. Your end users, right, through the intranet can use the local control plane as well, so you have that full range of capability with advantages of on-premise and advantages of the cloud service. So that's for your different database workloads. And then there's Exadata. You can do this with Autonomous as well. You can do this with Database Cloud Service or database-based service. And then moving into a similar type of deployment, but for your compute infrastructure. So this is where Oracle Compute Cloud at Customer comes into play. So just like Exadata Cloud at Customer, you'll have different starter configurations that you can work with. So it starts with a single rack. You can easily add that to your data center, and then you can expand as needed with additional racks and capacity. And since it's integrated with OCI, you'll get similarly, right, security services, dynamic scaling, same payment model with universal cloud credits, and it's delivered within your data center for those benefits that we've talked about in the last couple of slides. It's still going to be pretty scalable and flexible. You could utilize high performance compute. You'll have the storage and networking that can go along with this as well. I think the base level is 552 cores, and I think you can scale up to 2,200 in a single rack, but then you can have as many as you need as you add racks to your deployment as well. And one great thing about this as well is when you are interacting with this platform, you'll be able to use the same APIs, same software development kits, same management console. If you're used to utilizing public services for storage like block storage, file storage, object storage, all those are used with this service too. And your ability to work with them, share them, and do usage based off of demand is also going to be a feature of this too. So really just taking the aspects of Oracle Compute within the public cloud and trying to deploy that within your on-premise environment for both regular compute and high-performance use cases. If we get even more isolated here, right? So now we have Oracle hardware in your data center, behind your firewall, leveraging all of the different benefits of that cloud service. We also have roving edge. So this is going to be physical devices that you're going to be able to use for some different edge use cases. So if I have, it's going to make a little more sense if we talk about some of these. So maybe I want to have fast data collection and processing in the field. I could use one of these edge devices, has compute capabilities, storage capabilities, can stream data from sensors in remote locations, have that with this device so that you can go to remote locations and still have highly performant data ingestion there. If I want to deploy applications to more remote areas, I can also use this for that. So maybe for some government use cases, different government offices, military bases, remote campuses, I could leverage this to still have cloud capabilities at those locations. Similarly with development and testing, same kind of use case, and also for AI and machine learning. So if I can use the built-in GPUs for these devices, there's gonna be two different types of devices for it, I think, as well. But you could utilize the faster processing of your AI and ML workloads without having to rely on network connectivity to OCI to do so. So this is really accelerating speed and performance, but at locations that might be difficult to have that public cloud access for you. And the last piece we're gonna go over here, kind of similar to dedicated region, but what this is going to be doing is allowing a partner to basically become the cloud provider for their end users. It's called Oracle Alloy. So you'll have the full range of cloud services. Your Oracle is going to provide that platform, including the hardware and the software, and will train up the partner on utilizing all of that and including support. Two, the partners are going to control the end customer experience, manage all the operations, acting as the cloud provider for their end customers. So this is a newer service that has come out to allow, right, for one use case that hadn't been leveraged before. And maybe they don't have the investment to kind of create their own infrastructure for that. You're going to be utilizing Oracle infrastructure and all of the different services within for monitoring, management, operations, all of that to make a more easier to manage experience for the partner to supply that to their end users. I know it's a lot of different services, right? But now we have gotten to this more complicated cloud ecosystem, right? We have multi-cloud, right? We use Azure, we use AWS, we use OCI public cloud. We have different OCI public cloud services that we could be leveraging. So we might have compute and database within our own data centers. We might have edge devices out in the field. We might be connecting to our on-premise data center and then extending into OCI for disaster recovery, right? So you can see how this is getting more and more complex, but we have a way or multiple ways to kind of integrate all these together, give you visibility, provide you with the right integrations so that, yes, it's a complex cloud environment, but we want to make sure we're hitting all of the use cases that you need by providing these different services that we went over today. So Jason, I don't know, you want to add any additional color there before the key takeaways?
No. I mean, unless the group's got questions. I mean, I think what you're going to see from Oracle strategically, over the next 18 months, like let's talk 2 years, is you're going to see more network options. We connect directly to other clouds. I think you're going to see more options that if you're more familiar with AWS, GCP, Azure, like that's where you've got skill sets that are best in breed services, whether it's the Oracle database or other services like OIC, OAC, you're going to see them have availability. It was almost like, services being hosted out of those other consoles. And you're going to continue seeing us partner with what you'd see as our competitors to try to make sure that you as the consumer of these have a much better experience, an easier experience where you don't have to be an expert on 5 cloud platforms. You can be really good at one, be aware of where the good services are, and just consume it all from one spot.
Perfect. So from today, a couple simple key takeaways, right? We've kind of beat this over the head during the presentation, but main thing, right? You're going to adopt multi-cloud to optimize your cost, leverage the best of each of your providers. That includes your on-premise deployments as well to help you kind of get the most efficient and cost-effective and performant version of your overall cloud deployment. So Oracle services that enhance your hybrid deployments, Exadata Cloud at Customer, dedicated regions, and Oracle Cloud VMware, as well as some of the others that we went over today. And then hybrid cloud offers minimal cross-cloud connectivity and hybrid integrations, while multi-cloud offers direct cloud-to-cloud connectivity. So for those split stack workloads and direct connections that Jason talked about, and then we talked about the different use cases for putting the hybrid cloud services behind your firewall on your customer on-premise. So those are main key takeaways. We do have a lab if anyone is interested in getting more hands-on with multi-cloud type solutions. You can scan the QR code. We can provide the link after this as well if you need to. I'll leave it up for a second. Not required, but again, if you do want that hands-on piece, because we did not do a demonstration of this today, feel free to utilize this.
Yeah. Also recommend if you're working with an Oracle account team, reach out to them, beat on them a little bit to show you what we can do with this. If there's solutions that you think that would benefit from being across multiple clouds, ask them to show you how to enable that, whether it's connectivity or APIs or access or just the kind of the best practices, so you get the best experience out of both or all the clouds that you're using.
And if you want to do your own research to come up with some more questions or see what's covered before let's say you don't identify any initial use cases now for it, but you want to learn more information and then maybe something will come up. We have different references and links for you to take a look at. So you'll have the deck, the recording will be posted, and then we have links to other scenarios that you could use, right? So let's say I want to use Azure Interconnect. What are some of the ways in which I can leverage it, right? So we have two advanced scenarios. We have a general connection setup portion. We have split stack across multiple cloud providers, so not only Azure, but also AWS and GCP, so you can read up more on that. And then some different use cases for those other cloud providers as well. So again, just more information to give you a better idea of what some of the potential use cases are, and some of these are more tutorial-based to help you kind of walk through it and see how you could set that up within your environment as well. More training. So you can leverage these for more hands-on stuff outside of the topic today, right? This is going to be if you want to get certifications, if you want to go through additional labs not related to the multi-cloud one that I put up today, if you want to work with different teams like Code Innovate to build out a use case that you have in mind, if you want to look at documentation and best practices, all that can be found here as well. So tons of areas to learn, and please keep registering for these webinars as well. We do have a bunch of different series that we mentioned at the beginning. So cloud native, security, our general quick start series. So all of that, keep coming if you enjoy.
I think that is the end of the slide deck. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Again, slides and the videos will be posted out later, but thanks everybody.
And just a few more things before we close this call. Thank you, Jason and Joey, for today's session. Our next session will be deploying references architectures on July 2nd at 10 a.m. Pacific. So this session will cover how to deploy a reference architecture from build to start to finish, observing the OCI best practices and cloud adoption framework along the way. Any further questions, please feel free to email us at the personal trainer's email listed. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining.
Appreciate your time, everybody.